Are you planning your own wedding? Are you stuck for styling ideas? Feeling a little overwhelmed? Then this is the podcast for you. I'm your host and wedding planner, Vanessa from the Wedding and Event Creators, and I'm here to bring you practical hints and tips to kickstart your wedding planning. You're listening to the South Coast Wedding Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by our DIY wedding checklist. It can be found on our website, www.weddingandeventcreators.com.au/blog. Let's get wedding planning. Today's podcast is all about cocktail versus sit-down weddings. There are so many different options out there now when it comes to the style of wedding and food service that you'd like to have. And the more traditional 3-course sit-down wedding is no longer the only option available. You've got things like banquet service, buffet, barbecue, and the canape and cocktail style. Let's run through some things to consider if you're having a cocktail canape style wedding versus a sit-down wedding. So with a sit-down wedding, hire equipment needs to be considered. So you need to have a think about everything that you need when you sit down for a meal and what might need to be hired in. Now, depending on what your venue is that you've chosen in terms of hiring equipment, you'll need to consider things like entree and main plates and cutlery, dessert cutlery or spoons, water and wine glasses, and napkins to go at each place setting. Have a think about what chairs and tables that you would like to hire and if tablecloths are needed. For every set of around 8 guests or so, we do recommend a water jug, a wine carafe to place a bottle of white wine or champagne in, and also a bottle of red to be placed on the table to share. If you're having a buffet style, then you need to have a think about hiring in additional tables and cloths for this, along with placing the plates and cutlery at the buffet table instead of your main tables. You might want to consider the cost of your hire equipment for a sit-down meal that may be much higher than if you are going for a canape style, where the cutlery, additional plates, the glassware and everything that goes at each setting won't be needed. Now, styling the table. The centerpieces and tabletop styling like your candles, votives, vases of flowers, table runners and other props need to be considered when doing a sit-down meal. Keeping in mind that if you are having a banquet service, you do need to make sure that you leave nice gaps for the food. So we do recommend spreading out the styling into a few key areas and just keeping the rest relatively free, as it does get cleared away anyway a bit closer to food service to make way for the banquet plates. Have a think about your seating chart and your place cards. So at each guest setting, they'll normally have a place card, menu cards, and a seating chart at the front of your reception venue to gear guests towards their seat. And some people choose to have a little bonbonniere or a little guest favour at each place setting to pop down as well. Consider setting up the wedding. So setting up a sit-down dinner does take quite a bit of time. Trust me, we do it day in and day out, and for most 100 guest average weddings, our team of 2 to 3 staff might take up to 2 to 4 hours to set something like that up and style the dinner tables. There's quite a lot of attention to detail that does go into putting your napkins and folding them, making sure your glassware's clean and put out correctly. So if you are going to DIY this option, that's totally fine. Just check with your venue and see if they do allow set up the day before, as it is going to take quite a bit of time to set those sort of things up. So let's move on to cocktail or canape style wedding. So canape style weddings are generally less structured than a more formal sit-down wedding, but to make sure that your guests are going to be comfortable for the whole wedding, it means that you do need to have a good think about your furniture choices and your food choices to make sure everyone is happy. The main two reasons that we find that our couples choose to do a cocktail or stand-up dinner is that they do think it is more cost-effective. Now, this might actually be a myth, and of course get your quotes from various different caterers as they all completely vary, but canape-style food often takes a lot more time to prepare and can possibly be quite a bit more fiddly to prepare as well, as there's lots of different elements on the plate. There's a wide range of choices and ingredients that need to be sourced compared to, say, your more formal sit-down meal that's got, think chicken or fish. The second most common reason is that people want a more laid-back or informal vibe to their wedding rather than a sit-down meal, which does tend to lend itself to a more formal, structured evening. canape style weddings can still have those traditional formal elements like your speeches, your first dance, your cake cutting, but instead of finding a seat and sitting down to a meal, you are mingling and enjoying your food a bit more, less structured and flowing to be able to mingle around with your guests. Consider your furniture hire for a cocktail or canape style wedding. So sometimes we find that the furniture hire is actually more expensive than sit down. It all just depends on what sort of expensive couches and things you might be going for compared to more cost-effective options. So have a good think about how much seating you're going to have. So I always recommend seating for around about 75% of your guests as a really good ballpark guide for a canape style wedding or a stand-up style wedding. So say you've got 100 guests, I would look at around seating for about 75 people. So you do find at weddings that people often tend to find a seat really early on, plonk themselves down, and then they don't want to move for the whole wedding. So it's really important that there's enough seating for everyone. Providing a few seating options is really great as well. So having a think about doing things like picnic seating on the ground, featuring throws and rugs and cushions, through to something higher, maybe bar tables and stools, and then something mid-range level. Like we love to do couches with rugs and a side table or something similar. So there's a wide range of options for people to choose to sit down on. The younger people often happy to plonk themselves on the ground with a vino and just relax down there. And then you might find your grandma wants to sit in a more comfortable couch with a cushion. The next thing is to have a chat with your caterer about the food options. So again, another concern for canape style is that couples are often worried that with a cocktail canape style wedding that there are going to be people that miss out on food or there's not going to be enough food. You always seem to be the person that the wait staff does avoid when you have a canape style. So I think that's top of mind for a lot of people. So you might want to consider a combination of a grazing station that there permanent for guests to come and go as they please, picking and choosing on, nice meats and cheeses and crackers, combined with your cocktail roaming style service. So the canape style doesn't necessarily mean that you get just 3 deep fried spring rolls. They're quite elaborate now for things, weddings. So you might actually get 8 to 10 choices of canapes, along with 1 to 2 little bowls or substantial canapes, which might be a noodle box or something similar to that. So the benefits of canapes are that you can choose from a variety of different ingredients. The options are pretty endless when it comes to that style of food, rather than your sit-down meal that you might have to choose just a couple of dishes. Another great thing is having a good think about later in the evening when people get the munchies. So we love to ask our caterers to put on a late night supper, which is often yummy fresh baked rolls, a big piece of ham with different condiments, and people at maybe 9 or 10 o'clock at night get to have something before they go home. So there's quite a few things to have a good think about if you're going to have a more formal structured sit-down meal for your dinner compared to a canape cocktail style. What we've done is we've popped on the website a blog which basically runs through a lot of things I've spoken about now, and there's also a sit-down wedding hire checklist. But the other thing I would highly recommend is when it gets a little bit closer to your wedding, maybe 4 weeks out or 6 weeks out, get your hire company, your party hire company, or anyone that you're getting your hire equipment from, your planner and your caterer, to have a really good glance over all of your hire equipment and your setup vision. That way, a fresh set of eyes on those things means that someone may be able to pick up on something you've overlooked, like bins or water jugs or whatever it might be. So I'd highly recommend doing that when it gets a little bit closer to your wedding as well. Well, I hope today's been helpful, and until our next podcast, take care. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Make sure you jump onto our social media pages for more hints, tips and inspo. You can find us on Instagram at Wed Event Creators, on Pinterest at Wed Event Creator, and also via our Facebook page. And please don't forget to visit our website weddingandeventcreators.com.au to see our video tutorials and helpful blog posts.